Everybody could take a seat. It's 5:30 and we don't want to be late since all of you were kind enough to come in. We also have some people on Zoom, and we'll be recording this as well to share with other people that are interested in this. So my name, if I haven't had a chance to introduce myself, is Brent Raymond. I'm the new town manager. I started officially on the 28th, and this was one of my first briefings. So I'm glad that you all could come. The reason why you received notice and seemed probably very quick was because we have some milestone deadlines that are coming up, and we also have a potential funding opportunity tied to this, and it's a quite significant amount. So I wanted you all to be informed and then be able to answer questions, let you all know what the milestones are that are required if we were to choose to accept the funding, and potentially talk about, some of the ramifications if the development is to remain not compliant. So what we're going to be talking about for the funding is something called P3 ARPA award, and we have a member of the state here in person, Gianna. Gianna Petito is a grant supervisor at the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Environmental Conservation. Also via Zoom, we have Madeline Russell. She's the 3-acre stormwater project developer and program lead. And also from the state of Vermont, we have Terry Purcell, operational section supervisor. Tyler Mumley is a civil engineer who's been helping the town and the development really with this for since 2021, Tyler? Since 2021. Tyler has been nice enough to update me on this, and we've been in regular communication since I started a couple of weeks ago. And so thank you, Tyler, for not only helping us with this, but coming in tonight. And then from the select board, we have Laura, Chris, and Don. So thank all of you for coming.
And Brent, can I just say one thing? Just want the audience to know that there is a quorum of select board members here tonight. This is not a warned select board meeting, and we are here to listen and get educated along with the rest of you, but will not be getting involved in discussion and conversation and certainly opinions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Don. So how we're going to do this, the agenda, and I'm sorry I don't have one printed out, but the state has kindly offered to come and explain a lot of this to all of us. So Madeline, as I understand it, will be walking us through a majority of a PowerPoint that will be presented on the TV screen. Terry might interject here and there. Gianna's here for Q&A afterwards, but after the state goes through their presentation, Tyler and I can try to answer some of further questions, Tyler especially about technical matters, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. Madeline, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. Floor is yours.
Hold on 1 second, Madeline. I'm just going to turn up the volume on the TV so folks can hear.
Hold up. So I can't see what's being presented.
I'll pop it up for you.
Great. The loading.
Okay, how's that?
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, hi folks. Brent, thank you so much for introducing us. As Brent said, we are here to talk about supporting clean water at the Jersey Heights site. More specifically, this P3 grant funding opportunity that's presently on the table, funded through the American Rescue Plan Act. And just kind of the critical decision point we're here in the next few months that we wanted to talk to you folks about. So again, like Brent said, my name is Madeline Russell. I'm a 3-acre stormwater project developer and program lead. I basically manage our 3-acre funding initiative. We have multiple different areas of programming that I'll go into a little more detail in later. But basically, we just work to create funding opportunities and finance options for folks that are subject to the 3-acre rule. But I can turn it over to my colleague, Terry Purcell, for your introduction.
Good evening, everybody. Terry Purcell. I'm the operational section supervisor in the stormwater program. So I cover the regulatory side of things and also the technical side. You know, we review the design and engineering plans that are submitted by engineers and ultimately approve permits for issuance.
Okay. Gianna, I didn't know if you wanted to give your own introduction.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Maddie. Hi, everyone. I work with Maddie in the Clean Water Initiative program and the grant supervisor, so I support her in her 3-acre funding, but also some of our other funding through the Clean Water Board, some state funding that we manage for clean water purposes as well. Thanks for having us this evening.
Gianna, you can go to the next slide if you'd like. Great. So again, like Brent said, we're here to talk about just this overarching idea of stormwater regulation. So we just did introductions. The way the presentation is going to flow is we'll start, I'll have Terry jump in, talk a little bit about stormwater, this idea of untreated stormwater and why it's becoming more of an environmental concern. He'll then jump into Act 64, otherwise known as Vermont Clean Water Act. This is the main body of regulation that's underpinning this stormwater regulation work. Next, Terry will talk a little bit about how one knows whether they're a 3-acre site and what does that mean, what's required of them. Then from there, I'll come back in to talk a little bit about this P3 funding program, the program that brings this grant on the table, the funding source, the American Rescue Plan Act, what's kind of necessitating these strict timelines. And then a little bit just about the status of Morristown's ARPA award and what kind of needs to be done in the next steps there. So from there, Terry, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Maddie. So we're just going to touch on what stormwater is. We do have a regulatory definition, but in short, it's precipitation or snowmelt that runs off of impervious surfaces. So we're really looking at man-made surfaces here. We understand that there can be stormwater. You know, if you look at certain natural areas, obviously, if it's just a big rock, you know, that water's not going to get into the ground. But in terms of regulation, we're looking at the built environment, buildings, roads, parking lots, etc. You know, why do we regulate stormwater? It's essentially because of two major issues. Within stormwater runoff, as it flows over those surfaces, it's picking up pollutants. You know, there tend to be more pollutants in what we call non-rooftop runoff, but even over certain types of roofs, there can be metals, which are noted in there that are pollutants and that ultimately flow to receiving waters unless there's some form of treatment to remove and or reduce those pollutants. So the nutrients, you know, phosphorus is a major one in Vermont because we have a very large portion of the watershed flowing to either Lake Champlain or Lake Memphremagog. And freshwater lakes are particularly sensitive to phosphorus pollution. It causes algae outbreaks. You may have heard of cyanobacteria blooms, other really negative impacts to the lake. And there are also hydrocarbons, sediment, petroleum-based pollutants. So there's this array of pollutants in the runoff itself that is carried to receiving waters. And secondarily, there is the increased runoff volume. So when the water doesn't have anywhere to go, it can't sink into the ground. You have all this water conveyed sometimes by piping or by other means into receiving waters where previously that runoff would have gone into the ground. That's a great increase in volume depending on your area of impervious surface. And that can really scour away stream beds and ruin the habitat for the aquatic organisms. And that also itself carries additional sediment to receiving waters, and that sediment has phosphorus in it. So it's sort of a double whammy of impacts. And so the result, you know, is it can negatively impact the ability for us to use waters for recreational purposes, for fishing purposes. If the water isn't getting into the ground, that can impact even our groundwater supply if it's not, again, effectively managed. And it can also negatively impact plants and animals. You think particularly of macroinvertebrates in streams, which are essentially fish food. So if maybe you don't care about bugs too much, or you don't like bugs, but those of us who do fish and love fish, that's really a lot of what they eat. So why do we manage it? It's to prevent these impacts. And where there have already been impacts, it's to really restore waters to a state where they can achieve the required standards. We are required under the Clean Water Act to protect our waters, broadly speaking, and to maintain or restore the water quality in those downstream waters. So in recognizing that there were significant issues in Lake Champlain, a lot of this was looked at post Irene, the impacts from the flooding, and that brought a large pollutant load into the lake, and it became much more visible right afterwards of just how much can be carried in after these major storm events. We know just last year, the big event that happened. And also broadly speaking, this Vermont Clean Water Act was something that came about in part due to lawsuits. The state has been sued and has lost in the past regarding protection of our waters. And we were looking at a potential additional lawsuit that we likely would have lost had we not taken major action here. And that would have forced us potentially to go in a direction that the state may not have wanted to go in. So what we did was we passed this broad act that covers not only stormwater, but also farms and wastewater treatment plants and various sectors of the development in Vermont that are sources of pollution. And that's why it's, the term here, all in for clean water. It's not just about the developments and stormwater. But for stormwater, a big part of it was regulating discharges from existing impervious surfaces of 3 or more acres in size that were previously unpermitted or permitted prior to 2002. So there was a pretty big shift from the regulations prior to 2002 and post 2002. And that's why we did regulate sites, even if they had one of these older permits based on pre-2002 standards, as well as those that were unpermitted. So the requirements for this permit are in our rule. It's called the Chapter 22 Stormwater Permitting Rule, as well as in our general permit, which is 3-9050. The standards are in there, as well as the timeline for compliance. So there are specific dates for submittal of 3-acre permit applications in the general permit. And essentially, it was a 2-step process initially, but to have in some form a 3-acre permit, the coverage needed to be no later than 2023. So we're now a little bit past that point for those that have not come in yet. And the timeline for building the system once the permit is issued was 5 years. So once you get your permit, that is the time period you have to fully build out your system approved under the permit. So how do you know if you're a 3-acre site? I just covered, the definition here: never had an operational permit or is permitted to standards in place prior to that 2002 Stormwater Management Manual. We do have a list on our website of 3-acre sites. And the Jersey Heights subdivision, a portion of the authorization is copied into the slide here. And it's just illustrating here the impervious area. That may not actually be exactly correct as far as what's on the ground, but it was what was permitted originally. And so this was based on an older pre-2002 design, and that's why it's a 3-acre site, because it A, had a permit, and B, was pre-2002. So what is required? So in terms of who the applicant is, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because I know I've spoken to at least one homeowner here, and I understand that there are concerns related to this. But it's basically the landowner, the owner of the impervious surface or the lands on which the stormwater system is located or needs to be located under the proposed design. And that includes a municipality if they are a co-owner. So that is the situation here. The town, I believe, owns some of the roads in this development. So I believe they would need to be a co-permittee. And then for the landowners, if it's a new development, we have this owners association requirement for multi-lot developments. And I just want to talk about the specifics on that for this development. So because this is an existing development, we don't have the authority to directly compel organization of an owners association through compliance efforts. But all owners of impervious surface or the lands on which the stormwater system is located need to still apply and have permit coverage and comply with the permit. So in the instance where an association isn't formed, we can accept another legal entity that would accept responsibility for the stormwater system and serve a similar purpose. So I know that question has been raised. Do we need to form an association? It's not going to be absolutely required. I mean, we generally think that's the best approach to deal with the various aspects of this, but it doesn't need to be an association. So we can cover that in further detail if necessary, if somebody wants to reach out afterwards, or if you have questions tonight. But just to move on, the other step here is submittal of what we call a notice of intent for permit coverage, along with the other components of a complete permit application, along with an application fee. And a critical part of all of this is an engineering feasibility analysis. So for these 3-acre sites, we understand they're built out. They're existing developments. So the standards are typically considerably less than they would be for new development. And there is this feasibility analysis where we're not requiring you to pump stormwater runoff uphill or purchase land. There are certain things you don't need to do. And if your engineer can demonstrate that you don't need to do them, then there are other requirements that kick in for stormwater impact fees or offsets. And as we noted, the other big part of it is construction of the identified system within 5 years of permit issuance.
Great, thanks, Terry. One thing I want to highlight that I'm not sure if Terry mentioned is the number of sites that are applicable to this 3-acre requirement is north of 700 within the Lake Champlain, Lake Tomahawk Basin. So there's a ton of people that are subject to these regulations. So now that we've heard a little bit about the regulation, understand that it can impact over 700 sites. Some of you may have connected the dots with this regulation as the potential to impose significant costs on landowners. And this kind of raises the question, how might landowners go about paying for this? You can go to the next slide now if you want. So due to this, I want to shift to the funding mechanism and the funding programming that's presently helping 3-acre stormwater work move forward and is kind of the main piece affecting the timeliness of today's conversation. So the American Rescue Plan Act was passed in 2021 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is a federal legislation aimed to mitigate the economic impacts and public health crises that were brought on by the pandemic, which committed a substantial 1.9 trillion in aid and recovery efforts across the entire United States. And one of the key aspects of ARPA was its flexibility, as it allowed states the leeway to allocate funds where they were most needed for that state. And one of the things Vermont chose to prioritize in the wake of Act 64 was stormwater work due to the large number of affected sites and the diversity of financial capabilities of landowners to meet these new requirements. So here in Vermont, we received approximately 1 billion under ARPA, recognizing this importance of water quality and the need for compliance with the 3-acre permit. The Vermont General Assembly allocated 100 million of this towards clean water initiatives. 36 million of that allocation was then dedicated to supporting stormwater compliance for 3-acre sites specifically. And we linked at the bottom of this slide Act 674 and Act 185, where you can read a little bit more about these specific appropriations. But overall, the funds are now managed by the Clean Water Initiative Program, otherwise known as QIP, which is my and Gianna's team. And we collaborate with other programs such as the Stormwater Program, Terry's team, the Administration and Innovation Division, and other various ANR assistance programs. And these funds are being utilized across several initiatives, which I'll discuss a little bit in the next slide. But while the volume of ARPA is pretty significant, the real catch to it is that it does have a very strict timeline. And this has been an ongoing challenge for ANR to find projects that are going to be successful within this really tight time frame. So that timeline is that all allocated funds from ARPA must be encumbered into agreements by September of 2024. And then this money must be spent with the projects being completed by September of 2026. So there's unique and urgent opportunity to advance our regulatory stormwater work, leveraging this influx of federal funding to set compliance costs for landowners like yourselves. By prioritizing 3-acre work for ARPA funds, Vermont is aiming to ensure that we meet our regulatory obligations while also supporting landowners through the transition. And in addition to the 36 million allocated under ARPA for 3-acre stormwater compliance, as we just discussed, the Clean Water Initiative Program has successfully secured additional funding from the EPA to bolster these efforts. Our programming targets specific site usages such as public schools or manufactured.
Hold on, Maddie.
We cannot understand what you are saying.
They're asking if you could slow down a little bit with
Can
your
you slow
speaking.
down, and is there a microphone that you can get closer to?
Sure. Is this any better?
But you need to slow down, please.
I can slow down. So I'll start the slide again. So we got this 36 million allocated under ARPA for 3-acre stormwater compliance. On top of this, the Clean Water Initiative Program has also secured additional funding from the EPA to bolster these efforts. We have programming that targets specific site usages, which are public schools and manufactured housing communities. And we're just aiming to ensure we address diverse needs across the state. So to give you a better picture of how this money is being spent, where this P3 program sits, and how the project and grant we're talking about today fits into all of this, I want to quickly walk through the 5 key areas of our 3-acre programming. Number 1 is our Green Schools Initiative. This program is designed to support stormwater management projects in public schools. With it, we have a budget of nearly $30 million, and the initiative aims to improve water quality while creating educational opportunities for students to learn a bit more about environmental stewardship. Then number 2, we have our Phase 1 engineering services for manufactured housing communities, otherwise known as MHCs. This phase focuses on providing essential engineering and permit design services to MHCs, and it has a budget of $480,000. It basically helps these communities develop effective stormwater management plans, and it lays the groundwork for subsequent construction efforts in the future. which leads well into number 3, our phase 2 construction assistance for manufactured housing communities. This is building on the engineering services provided in this phase 1. This phase offers substantial construction assistance with a budget of over 5.6 million. And it ensures that MHCs can implement the necessary infrastructure to comply with stormwater regulations. And then number 4, this is one of our largest offering that's presently happening. This is our permit obtainment assistance, otherwise known as our POA program. The POA program is specifically designed to help a majority of eligible 3-acre sites with costs associated for final design and permit obtainment. It has a budget of $12.4 million, and this program provides $49,999 per site to support these costs, the cost with permit obtainment and design. So I want to note, and it's very important to note, that this POA program does not cover construction costs, which does pose a challenge for many of the participating sites. And the main reason I'm highlighting this is that this program would be the main alternative in the case that this grant falls through. Through this program, this site specifically would be able to recoup up to $50,000 of whatever is ultimately spent on permitting and design work. That $50,000 may or may not be enough to cover what is actually expended on permitting. And again, it does not cover construction. So while there are other options, the P3 grant that's presently on the table is going to be the most lucrative in terms of cost coverage, at least what's presently available. Which then leads me into number 5, our public-private partnership program, otherwise known as our P3s. The P3 program is a unique initiative that supports both design, permitting, and construction. It has a budget of over $3 million. And this program is only available to a select group of towns, which includes Morristown. Morristown is one of only 7 towns out of these 700 plus 3-acre sites across the Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog basins to receive this award, which kind of highlights the importance and the unique opportunity that it does present. And I'll jump a little bit more into the P3 program in the next slide. But overall, just want to say that Cook's approach ensures that we can provide comprehensive support across a bunch of different property types and communities, and we hope to facilitate compliance with the 3-acre rule.
And you slow down again, please.
Sorry. So public-private partnerships, or P3s, these are partnerships between municipalities and private landowners that are becoming an increasingly important tool to address efficiencies and reduce costs for stormwater projects. Our 3-acre P3 program explores how these partnerships can be effectively utilized to improve water quality, restore water resources, and meet permit requirements in developed land environments. So to give you some background, before the advent of ARPA, DEC funded a pilot project in 2019 to demonstrate the feasibility of these types of partnerships. The pilot project aimed to showcase high-value compliance projects that provided mutual benefits to both private landowners and the public. Public-private partnerships are not new. They're pretty widely used in other infrastructure sectors, such as roads and drinking water, to achieve shared community goals, pretty much. So as mentioned before, these partnerships have shown to effectively reduce costs, to improve quality control, and expedite implementation. The Watershed Consulting Associates served as the lead project coordinator for this initiative, with support from a couple other important subcontractors. Together, they worked to establish cost-effective ways to achieve water quality goals, meet permit requirements, and provide benefits such as supporting local communities. So one principal outcome of these partnerships was the develop of a 30% design plan for each of the 10 selected 3-acre sites. Then from there, once ARPA hit the ground, these sites were thought to be well positioned to take advantage of this funding, as they had already been vetted, they had this partially completed design work, and they were deemed likely to succeed within this tight ARPA timeline. So of these 10 sites, 7 then elected to participate and were eligible for further support and funding, and this included Morristown. So the ARPA P3 award was scaled to cover roughly 72% of projected construction costs. For Morristown, this translates to an award value of approximately $316,675, covering both final design and permitting and construction expenses. So overall, in summary, the ARPA 3-acre P3 program represents a pretty significant investment in Vermont's water quality and our infrastructure. And by leveraging public-private partnerships, we hope to reduce costs, improve the efficiency of our projects, and overall achieve stormwater compliance goals in a way that's collaborative and mutually beneficial to everyone involved. So now that we've talked a little bit about the background of the P3 award, the main topic of today's conversation kind of is the current status of Morristown's ARPA P3 award and the critical next steps that need to be taken. So going back to May of last year, we had sent a draft award to the town of Morristown. And as mentioned before, this award represents a significant opportunity to leverage this ARPA funding to support both the design and the construction phases of the stormwater compliance project. Then jumping forward, April of this year, over the past few months from April to June of 2024, the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation has been in regular contact with the town to just discuss progress, where to go from here and provide assistance where needed. And these check-ins are very helpful to ensure we're all on the same page and moving forward as effectively as we can. So now we've reached a pretty critical decision point. Basically, the town of Morristown has 2 main options with this P3 grant. Number one is going to be to identify a responsible party and then to execute the award because the grant's not yet signed. To do this, the town overall needs to identify who's ultimately going to be responsible for managing the stormwater system and formally execute the award. And this step is pretty crucial for us to proceed with the project and ensure it's going to be successful within the ARPA timeline I just discussed. And then option number 2 is unfortunately going to be to decline the award and reallocate these funds. If the town decides not to proceed for any number of reasons, we will need to reallocate the ARPA funding to other eligible projects. Because if we don't use this money by this September 2024 date, it actually goes back to the federal government and we have no way of using it from there. So this step is really necessary for us to ensure the funds are utilized effectively before this encumbrance deadline, which then jumps us to September of 2024. The ARPA encumbrance date is definitely looming. By this point, all ARPA funds must be encumbered into agreements or risk going back to the federal government. This means that we need to have all the necessary assurances and agreements in place well before this deadline to avoid losing the funding and making sure everything's in place in a way the federal government approves of. So this is all to say DEC is slightly concerned about the likelihood of the project being successful within the ARPA timeline. This is pretty much why we're requiring additional assurances regarding who will assume responsibility for the stormwater system. These assurances are pretty crucial and we need them to happen sort of in a timely manner to ensure the project does proceed. Or in case it does not proceed, we have enough time to reallocate the funds into other projects. So what the town can do now would be, like I said, to identify a responsible party, clearly designating who will be responsible for the stormwater system, and then executing the award by formally signing and agreeing to move forward with the project. So overall, decisive action is needed pretty promptly with this ARPA timeline. This project does represent a valuable opportunity to improve water quality and meet these regulatory requirements with significant financial support. However, we have to act pretty quickly to ensure the success of the initiative within the given time. So then from have some helpful resources if you want to learn a little bit more. The first one is our webpage for the 3-acre funding initiative if you want to learn more about our funding programs. And then next we have some more information on stormwater general permit 39050. That is the resource or the regulation Terry was talking about earlier in the presentation. Then next, a little bit more about that P3 pilot project that initially identified these sites, these public-private partnerships. You can access that at the P3 pilot link. And then if you have any questions about funding assistance, I'll be your contact person. You can find me at madeline.russell@vermont.gov. And then any questions about the regulations specifically, you're going to want to contact your stormwater district reviewer, which depends on where you live. I believe that's Terry in this case, but if you click on that map, it'll make it pretty clear who to talk to.
So, sir, I think I can guess what you're saying is you can't really see this. This is being recorded and it'll be up on our website plus directly shared.
Okay, can it be printed, because,
Yeah,
what came through is not through. I don't think people understand what our obligations are.
what we're going to discuss further, but I
Okay,
want to assure you that we'll provide, if you need it to be printed, we can print it for you.
good.
And we'll get this information both through, you can listen to it again if you'd like, skip through to get to the report, or you can print. But I understand.
Or a second or third time.
Sure. And so I know there's going to be questions, but so that other people that aren't able to be here tonight or people that want to listen later on, when you have your question, if you can line up and speak into the microphone, that'll help people at home who will listen to this later. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. And we're not done yet, but I knew that you wanted to interject and make sure that you were going to receive this information, and you will. Sorry, Maddie.
Just want to thank you folks for allowing us the chance to present. I apologize for going too fast. I'm happy to reiterate anything that may have not been clear.
How long has this been in the planning session? I mean,
Ma'am,
this
if you could get up to the microphone, please.
Yeah, I'm just, hello, can you hear it? Okay, how long has this been in the planning stages? Is this just because of all the flooding that has happened? All of a sudden, there's all this money that seems to be floating around that you've got to find something to put it into, so all of a sudden, we're looking at stormwater, which apparently in one case in the Jersey Heights is right behind my house, exactly behind my house. And I'm a little concerned about what type of system it's going to be. Is it going to be a cesspool of some sort, or is it going to be covered? And the other thing is, now you're saying, who's going to take care of it? It's going to be put in, and who's going to be responsible for taking care of this? Sounds like very complicated system. So it just seems as though things are being pushed onto us because there's a 3-acre piece of property located in the Jersey Heights area. Okay, I guess that's it.
So Gianna, do you want to take a first stab at responding to some of the questions? I know there were several, but
Yeah.
trying to respond to them. And if you could, I don't know that those microphones are connected. They are? Okay, cool.
Yeah, happy to. First question that I wrote down, I'm just typing in the questions here so I can follow along, is how long has this planning been going on? So there's a couple different pieces that I'll pull from the presentation. The first is the regulation itself came out of 2015, Act 64, 2015, which, as Terry was mentioning, was the Vermont Clean Water Act. And so it set a whole bunch of regulations on a whole bunch of sectors, one of which was stormwater and this 3-acre requirement. So that's been at play for almost 10 years now. And some of the regulatory deadlines, as Terry mentioned, I can let him speak more to it, have come and gone. I think 2023, some notice of intents were required. In terms of the funding component of it, the American Rescue Plan Act dollars came to Vermont in 2021, 2022-ish, and that's when the General Assembly allocated a portion of that to DEC to support 3-acre sites in meeting these regulatory requirements. Does that answer your question on the timeline of planning?
Is this the only 3-acre portion that you're looking at in Morrisville, just the one in Jersey Heights?
So in terms of the regulation, there's over 700 sites in Lake Memphremagog and Lake Champlain, and several of them are also multi-lot sites. So you're not unique in being a multi-lot site. The way Maddie had shown a sort of a table of how this funding is being distributed across several funding programs. And the majority of this money, the majority of the sites can access one funding program, which is our permit obtainment assistance to help support permit design and obtainment costs, and they can get up to $50,000. This particular project with Jersey Heights is one of only 7 that also got construction assistance. And so it's a much larger sizable award. And the reason was because it was building off of a pilot project that actually my ex-colleague here, Jim Pease, helped lead in figuring out what are these really great opportunities to shine a light on the benefit of public-private collaboration in this space.
So
And
you're
I-
saying this is one of 7 within Morristown?
No, one of 7 in the state to receive the ARPA P3 funding. And in Morristown, I believe there are 15 3-acre sites. Is that,
Oh, I would have to go back and check, but I can.
3-acre sites that you're planning to do this project on? Or
no.
just
So what we're talking about tonight, this funding opportunity and Jersey Heights development is specific to Jersey Heights. So there's 14 others approximately, again, I've been diving into this over, 10 days. So I might be wrong, it might be 10, but I believe it's 15 that are in Morristown. And you all can correct me if I'm wrong, the difference is that there's one private landowner for all others. Jersey Heights, it's a development with no HOA. So that's why they're considering it a public-private partnership. And anybody, please correct me if I'm mistaken.
Okay, my understanding was that this parcel that you're looking at is owned by one person, Howard Pinard. That's my understanding. I may be wrong.
Tyler, can you help me address that?
So that they talked about earlier in the presentation that there was a 30% conceptual design completed. And as part of that design that was completed, the stormwater treatment practice was located behind your house on that lot that Howard owns, which I think up until then, they thought it was a common law, but
Right.
Howard owns it. But
Howard owns it.
so, but that stormwater treatment practice is based off of the stormwater runoff from the subdivision, right? So even though the actual practice, in this case, it was underground stormwater chambers, even though that is located specifically in that spot, it's treating the subdivision, runoff from the roads, from the driveways, and from the buildings across the subdivision. So that's why it's considered to be, owned by the town roads and by the individual landowners.
So my other question is why specifically behind my house? Because there's a bigger water problem up toward the, I don't know what you call it, the Foss Street and Jersey Way. There's always been a lot of water up there. My ex had actually done some of the construction when they were building the Jersey Heights, and that area always filled up with water. There was never that much of a problem behind my house specifically. So I just wondered what kind of study you did as to why you decided that particular site instead of where there was always a known problem with water.
The conceptual analysis was done by a different consulting firm years back as part of the initial grant for the 30% funding. And the 3-acre rule says you need to provide water quality treatment to at least half of the impervious area, or provide half of the water quality requirement to the entire impervious area. And so their initial design was based on a best fit solution that could capture runoff from half of the impervious area of the subdivision in its entirety. And so that location made sense because of where the runoff is, where there are existing stormwater drainage pipes and connecting into those pipes. And it just made the most sense from their analysis.
Could you define impervious?
Something at the beginning.
Yeah, very basically impervious is roads, driveways, and buildings. And that's gravel or paved. Anything that's, man-made that doesn't allow water to go through it. Sidewalks, compacted walkways, anything like that.
So would that include houses?
A house, yeah, a roof, correct.
Is there more of a program, or are we in the Q&A section?
Well, we've started on Q&A already, but
Yeah.
is there more that wants, is this the end of the presentation for you?
That's the end of the presentation slides that we have prepared, and I know that there was some a difficulty listening in, so happy to take just clarification questions too, to help answer those.
So this might end up being a 2 or possibly 3-part question, but Maddie, I'm wondering if you could go back to one of your slides. I think it was the one right before you showed the timeline that was describing Jersey Heights as a development. Yeah. So there's a description in here. I couldn't read all of it, partly because of the graphic over it. But where does this information come from?
Can you move that bar across there? Move it out, so we can read the bottom part.
It seems to be referring, yeah, this is the part I couldn't read. If you don't mind, I'm just going to read it.
Yeah, and I've got copies printed right now.
Out loud, please.
Out loud?
Yeah, read it out loud.
The partnership scenario represented at this site is a collaboration between multiple homeowners and the municipality. See Appendix Q3 for a description of the partnership benefits. The Jersey Heights residential subdivision currently does not have a formal homeowners association, HOA. In the final Landover meeting, partners agreed that forming an HOA is necessary to move forward with project implementation on common land. Monash Corporation, a water services company, owns the common land and the proposed project is located on and will need to be contacted to inquire about potential project implementation. See final partner meeting minutes in Appendix, H7? Okay, thank you. So what is the partner meeting, the final Landover meeting? What was that? Right, can someone elaborate on that?
I can start, and I might pass it to Jim to finish. So this text is from the final report, the public-private partnership pilot effort, and a description of that. And I know that Jim Pease helped oversee that work and may be able to speak to the findings out of the report and why this site was recommended. Is that okay to pass your way?
Jim, if you could get up on me. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I,
What public meeting?
Yeah.
well, okay.
I don't know, thank you.
Yeah, my name is Jim Pease. I live in Morrisville, and I did work for DEC.
Yeah.
I don't work for DEC now.
What's DC?
Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. And this project was a pilot project, as Maddie said, We had a certain amount of money that was given to us to try and start looking at the problem of 3-acre sites. We looked for areas, and this is all documented in this report that Judy just handed out, or at least she handed out the summary of it. There is a larger report on the website, but we could be here all night with this. We did, as you know, well, as you may not know, some of you know, we did attempt to reach the homeowners, but there is no homeowners association. That is a major problem. It isn't going to make this go away, but it is a problem. And so we did meet with some of the concerned landowners that we could get in touch with.
When was it?
It's documented in the report, but it would have been, I retired in August of 22, so I believe it would have been the summer of 21. And not to correct my friends, but the funding started back in 2019. The Act 64 started in 2016 or 15, everybody said, but the funding that came for this project, which I believe was through the Lake Champlain Basin Program, came in 2019. It took 2 years to implement the project, and the project was completed in, excuse me?
Oh, no, I
Oh.
said, this is all COVID time, too.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have to move on. The legislature said we have to move on. We attempted to reach the homeowners. None of the homeowners responded to our attempt, except a few here. The town was in a bit of a morass, as they've been for a few years, and it was postponed and sort of indefinitely. So I don't know how to further go on about this. The final report was filed. The state, for better or worse, did nothing for 3 years as the clock ticked. The clock's been ticking. We gave a draft permit, a draft grant for this money to the town in January of 21, I believe, or 22, sorry. 22, so that's 2.5 years ago. And there's been no action. And there's been a number of reasons the town has not acted. But so that's why we are where we are today. And I think there's possibly a solution here, but I mean, it's going to require the majority of owners, I would guess, participating in some way. I assume some of you are from the condominium association as well as the homeowners. So, I mean, that's great, because that's the first step in getting this resolved. And then the other step, obviously, is somebody, I'm not going to point fingers, somebody needs to talk to Mr. Minaj, who's very generous now, and maybe he's a little more friendly about giving this land to the town or the homeowners, and I know there's no homeowners association, but providing some kind of legal connection for the permit. And I'm gonna let this guy. So I mean, that's one of the next things that has to happen. It's had to happen for 2.5 years. Yeah, Rich, you want to help?
Just let me address a couple of things in your response. One, Terry mentioned earlier that the state cannot compel an HOA. The town can't compel an HOA. But there needs to be some sort of partnership or agreement. So Terry, if you could discuss a little bit further, if an HOA is not formed, how do you suggest we move forward to be in compliance and to also take advantage of these grant funds?
I think the most important time-sensitive step now is to, get Maddie, and Gianna the information they need so that they're they can move forward with approving this grant money. We can sort out the details of how we go about permitting. I mean, in short, I think it needs to be some type of legal entity. We're currently in conversations with our attorneys on what that could be, but we need to know that the homeowners are, in agreement and able to move forward with these requirements. I think it's been brought up that, yes, the stormwater system elements might end up being located on this property that is just in one area of the site, perhaps. But the runoff itself is coming from collectively the impervious surfaces that are owned by various parties, individual homeowners. So, I think that's the step that needs to be taken, because the town, although they've previously been the only permittee, and that is a little bit unusual, that there was never a homeowners association formed. Typically for these types of developments, there has been an HOA formed. So I would say whatever needs to take place to give the funding group the assurance that this is a viable project in that sense. In other words, there isn't going to be a situation where the town, as the only permittee to date, would be stuck in a situation where they don't have the cooperation that they need, the understanding that they need from the landowners as far as what can be done and what needs to be implemented for the permitting.
Can I ask my follow-up question? Okay, so I think bottom line, what I want to know is what criteria or legal power gives the state the right to decide that this development is not the same as a typical street in town? I mean, presumably all the homes in, I don't know, the center of Morrisville are not being looked at as generators of, a collective generator of stormwater runoff. So I think many of us probably bought homes in Jersey Heights, viewing them as your typical town home. And many of us, I can speak for myself, I don't want to live anywhere where there's an HOA. I don't want to have a collective responsibility. That's why I don't own a condo, et cetera. The fact that it may be deliberate that there is no HOA association, and I guess what I don't understand is if anyone here can explain what the criteria and empowerment is for even identifying our neighborhood in the first place as qualifying as a 3-acre site.
Yeah, I can address that. I think the empowerment from the state perspective is that this is for a specific clean water purpose. This is to reach specific goals. There will be, for example, river mouth phosphorus monitoring to determine the effectiveness of all of this. I mean, that's a key aspect, of course, to determine what are the improvements in terms of the pollutant loads to the receiving waters. So this isn't arbitrary in that sense. We couldn't regulate statewide every impervious surface, for example. That would be just impossible and unreasonable. So there was a threshold set by the legislature, and it did bring in some of these existing developments that already had permits, these multi-lot developments. Under the regulatory definition of a 3-acre site or an impervious surface of 3 or more acres that was established, this development happened to be brought in because it was permitted for greater than 3 acres of impervious surface previously.
So if I could try to translate that, when this when this development was developed, the developer applied for a permit. The permit satisfied various components to be approved, including stormwater at the time. But based upon that original permit, as the state stormwater permitting changed, they've now categorized this as a development under that initial permit.
Yeah.
Tyler, can you?
Yeah, clearly there was a disconnect in the process, but I don't see how that obligates individual homeowners to be responsible for that.
I think what he's saying is that, that the legislature or the state, I suppose it was the DEC, decided to implement the 3 acre requirement. They would choose parcels that had 3 acres of impervious, a single parcel. So the Morrisville Plaza, the Northgate Plaza, those are all on the list. And any common plan of subdivision. So Jersey Heights was permitted as one project, not like Best Street or some of these other streets that were, they weren't, at the time, they weren't 3 acre. That's the criteria the state used. They looked at common plans of subdivision and triggered by permits.
Right. So are you basically saying that the logic is the state has the right to retroactively demand that private citizens be responsible for something that was permitted back in what, 2001, 2000? And that many of us don't even know about and did not even know exists?
Yes, because that isn't the state, it's the legislature. The
Right, it's the
legislature has the
legislature.
authority
Yeah.
to do that. That's the difference. The State Department of DEC implemented to the best of their ability that requirement. But it was the legislature that said you need to look at every parcel or every 3 acre project.
Can I ask you something?
It's a logic that I think many of us don't agree with.
I don't disagree with you, but I think it's sort of too late. The legislature has already implemented it, and sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's great. It's just one quick question. If we do not act, then what happens?
Thank you for your patience. Terry, do you want to respond?
Yeah, so first of all, we greatly prefer voluntary compliance in any way we can get it. But we've obviously gotten this question previously, what if we do nothing? We do have broad enforcement authority. We are obligated to ensure that the requirements set by the legislature are met through the permitting, through ultimately the on-site implementation of the stormwater improvements. So that can mean different things depending on the specific situation. It's not always the same, but ultimately, worst case scenario, I usually mention a court order. How exactly that would play out in different sites and different situations with different landowners, different parties. I prefer not to speculate because it's very much case by case. But that would be a potential scenario, and certainly we have no interest in wanting to go there. But it would be a court order in addition to a likely civil penalty along with that court order. And those penalties, if the court order is not adhered to and responded to, they can increase.
So I have a couple. One is, didn't you mention that there are 7 other, it's sites that are similar to what we're doing right here? Didn't you say there's 7 in Vermont?
There are 6 other, 7 total, towns who have received an award to support a public-private partnership with one of their 3-acre sites within that town.
So what are
But
they-
there's
okay. So my-
far more than 7 sites across the 700 that are co-permitted between a town and a multi-lot development.
Okay, and so how did they do it? Like, what did they set up HOA with these people who are not related in any shape or form?
Maddie, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe all the other ones are either a single site, private site, or there's an HOA involved for the 7 P3s.
So we would be the only one doing this like this, is that correct?
Of these awards, you would be, I think, unique in having a multi-lot development without an HOA. But of the 700 sites subject to 3-acre, you're not unique. And I could punt this to Terry to answer because he's seeing some of the applications come in. There are many sites that include multiple landowners in a multi-lot development, and some of them may not have an HOA.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. This is not the only site in this situation. And in many cases, those situations are still playing out. Like I mentioned, it's a 2-step permitting process, or it was at least in the past. And so we still have some that need to be resolved as far as ultimately the permitting scenario and who is the co-permittee where there was no association.
Okay, so are there other alternatives, I guess is what I'm really asking, besides making this ginormous HOA that has which is a legality, a whole another level of legalness that we would all be in, that I think some of us are objecting to? I mean, besides making us an HOA, is there some other way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where I think, it would be important to have an attorney involved in these discussions. Ultimately, that's what most folks do in the formation of an HOA, and similarly, any legal entity. And it's also important, I think, to know, and I'm not an attorney, but I believe this is the case based on my own experience working with these different types of projects, is that you can structure that legal entity so that it's really focused on the stormwater. You have to do this for a specific purpose. There are regulations. And so to avoid having it cover all sorts of other things in your development and create potential restrictions that people may not want any part of, I know that that is something that has been done. For
Terry,
these types
can
of
I ask a question? Is it still the case that an alternative is the town takes full responsibility, but there's sort of some asterisks about what the town would be willing to take on? Or is it still more, is that an option as well per the regulations, or am I misreading those?
It is an option, but it's not something the town would be required to do.
Right.
So if they were to agree to that, yes, if we have one party who accepts full responsibility, but it does get complicated at times when you're dealing with, systems on private land that the town does not control. Typically, there needs to be a pretty solid agreement between the town and the homeowners, a formal agreement that outlines maintenance tasks and who's responsible for what, and making sure that the permit can be complied with effectively.
And I just have a quick question, I think, for Mr. Mumley about pumping uphill, because it is uphill from where I am. So Jersey Court, a portion of Jersey Way, Sterling Court, we're all below this place that you're gonna put. this wastewater treatment. Yep, that's uphill from me. So from what I heard Terry say earlier, you're not pumping uphill, is that correct?
One of the reasons why that location was selected is because a lot of the runoff from Jersey Core area, there's a catch basins there, and they all go in underground storm pipes
Yeah.
that eventually go past your house, very deep. And because they're so deep, you could put I'm talking like 15 feet deep. You could put the stormwater chambers in the ground at that depth to intercept that runoff through the pipes to be treated as part of that stormwater chamber system.
So you would treat it that part lower, and then the upper part would treat the rest of Jersey Way and Foss Street?
The conceptual map tried to capture 50% of the impervious area, and it did it through that stormwater collection system coming from Jersey Core. Also, there's a storm pipe system along Foss Street that also kind of cuts across your front yard. And the plan was to tap into that also and pull that water back behind your house. So there was a proposed pipe between your house and your neighbor to get into that system.
So
So
essentially, you won't be pumping uphill.
no pumping uphill. But to piggyback on what Terry was saying with that in mind is that, it'd be ideal if the town could just take ownership and
Folks, sorry to interrupt. The town just got muted for us, so we online can't hear the questions.
Hi, Maddie.
So could you repeat that for us?
We said, when most of these people bought, including myself, your lawyers made sure that everybody had a stormwater permit. Now you're telling us those stormwater permits were no good, and we've got to start over? Is that what you're saying?
I think the answer to that question is,
Jim, if you could come up, please.
this is my retirement, I guess. I think the short answer to that question is, the state issued those permits many years ago, starting in early 70s. And those permits originally had a 5-year life. And unless you, as a homeowner or a homeowners association, a parcel owner, made the effort to renew that permit, it expired and sat there and nothing happened. And then in the 80s or 90s, there was a Bianchi decision that said that if you had an expired permit, whether it was Act 250, any kind of permit, I'm not sure about a town permit, but any kind of state permit or federal permit associated with a property that had expired, you could not sell your property.
Some of that was grandfathered.
Okay. Okay, you may know more than I do, but I'm talking about stormwater permits. So if you had a stormwater permit and you bought your house, I'm not sure when the town renewed this permit. I think you guys have to realize that the town, for better or worse, stepped up. Howard Nash did not. Once he sold every lot in that subdivision, except for what he still owns, every building lot, he was done. And as far as the state's concerned, they couldn't pursue him. The town stepped up, I don't know when this was, in the 90s, and picked up the expired permit because of the Bianchi decision. Because if you lived, and we don't, if you lived outside of Burlington, you couldn't sell your property if your permit was expired. And if you worked for IBM, you couldn't sell, you couldn't move, you couldn't go anywhere until your permit was cleared, put into clear, was renewed. So the state set up a program to renew those permits. And the town, back in the 90s, came and renewed the permit. They couldn't get the homeowners association. There wasn't one. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart. And they paid the bills. They paid the, so I'm, you may laugh, but that's what in fact happened. And the town picked up any costs associated with maintaining that road, as far as drainage goes, that was required under the permit. And not knowing that the legislature had the authority to change the rules. And they did. And now the town has their name on the permit as a sole permittee because there's no association. And they're sort of stuck. But as Terry said, it will come down to the fact who owns the impervious cover. And it turns out, roughly, that the town owns 20 to 30% of the impervious, and the homeowners, the condominium and the homeowners, own the rest. So you're on the hook for 70 to 80% of that cost, something in that area. The town's on the hook for the rest, legally. If they went to court, that's what would happen. And so one of the reasons it wasn't the only reason, certainly, but the money was set aside for the homeowners to take advantage of the fact that they were in a pickle, in a way. You didn't know it, but you were. You didn't have a homeowner association. There never was one created, and you clearly don't want one now. So that's why we're in the situation we're in. And I think that there's a couple of opportunities here. I'm not sure, we haven't talked about them, but the town the homeowners may not need to form an association. The town adopted a new town plan a few years ago, and in that town plan, there's language in the plan that says that they can create an assessment district for an area of the town. They were specifically talking about Jersey Heights, anywhere, and that has special considerations, whether it's water, wastewater, electricity, whatever it is. And the town could create a sort of a zoning district around that, and they can assess a fee to the homeowners.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one option. That may not be acceptable to you.
That's a TIF.
Well,
That's in the town plan.
it's, okay.
It's a TIF, okay, and that's the only, and that is for taxing for further development. Eliminating, the last time it was used was to pay the Village of Mooresville Water and Light to get rid of the Katie's
Katie's
Falls.
Falls.
That's
Okay.
the last time they did it. I was on the board of trustees when that happened.
Okay.
But that's the only thing in the town.
Okay, okay. There's one other option, which Terry hasn't mentioned, but I know he is aware of, that in Fairfax, it's a little bit different, but the town did not have, the subdivision did not have a homeowners association. It also did not have any town involvement. There was no town roads. The homeowners created a fire district. That is a legal entity that you could, you have to create. It's not that complicated. I have the schedule of how to do it. But you would have to do it, or with the assistance of the town, or the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, you could develop that district. And then that district could be the legal entity to be a co-permittee on this grant. That's what Fairfax did. I can't remember the name of the subdivision, but they did do that, and I believe Judy said somebody maybe in St. Albans or something. Anyway, there were a few, there's at least one where that has worked. So that's another option. But I think, to be honest with you, and I don't want to take up all the time here, but there is a lot of money on the table that you potentially can take if both the town and the homeowners are willing. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with the whole bill. And not only are you going to be stuck with the whole bill, you're going to be stuck with maybe an enforcement action with the state and a fine, because usually the state doesn't just say, no, bad folks, you shouldn't do that. They're going to stick a $10,000 fine. So, I mean, it's really, I mean, I guess I'm just a little depressed that even when the town made an effort to get 50 or so homeowners out here, now, is there
We
40?
never heard about this. We never, ever heard about this.
Well, there
None
was-
of us did. And we're on top of it. We listen, we watch, you
No,
know.
no, no, this meeting right here, you were invited to this meeting, right? You received an invitation
Oh,
to
yeah,
this meeting.
this meeting.
Right,
Yeah, but this is
as
the
the
first-
condominium
This is the
association.
first time we know about any of this.
No, I understand that, I understand, well,
The
I
very
think
first
we
time.
made an effort to try and reach out, but there's no way to reach out to 50 people. Well, if you're looking at it from the state's point of view, it's the bird's view. You know, there's a lot of subdivisions out there, and they made an effort.
Okay, well, we're at today, and we need to go forward
Okay.
from today.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that those are, I believe, are your two options. Either form a fire district, or maybe an assessment district. With the town.
That's the way.
Go ahead.
Ma'am, you're next. Sorry.
So what are we looking for in looking at in terms of actual development of this thing, and how much money are we looking at in terms of each homeowner?
So I can help answer a portion of that. Back in 2021, the estimate for the stormwater treatment is $439,900. The P3 grant is based upon approximately 72% of the projected construction costs. And so that's $316,000, $675 is on the table. How that breaks out into homeowners individually, I cannot answer that yet. These are the homeowners. These lots here, absent buildings, are not included. So the town has not had time, or I have not had time to break out how many homeowners are involved. This meeting is to try to get everybody up to speed and try to move forward. Let you all know that there is substantial money on the table, but there are deadlines. And so we need to, it sounds very complicated, and there's been things thrown out like fire districts, and there's certain methodologies for getting a fire district approved. HOA, I know that sounds overwhelming. I've had several questions about how do we form an HOA. It's relatively common in most developments, and there's plenty of attorneys out there that can put it together. And part of what I've been doing is trying to provide a risk assessment for the town as well. Because as has been mentioned, even if the town were to accept all responsibility, we would need agreement from certain homeowners for easements. We need at least an easement from Mr. Minash, which I understand we have a verbal agreement, Tyler, am I mistaken?
A loose verbal, yes, thumbs up from Howard.
So, there's not only the risk assessment for the town of if we were to take this responsibility into perpetuity, of the initial costs, but quickly getting some sort of initial approval from certain landowners if you weren't to form an HOA, and then in perpetuity, what are the costs for maintaining the stormwater?
What is that?
So we're quickly trying to get this information, and I understand everybody's frustration. That's natural, and I want to say thank you for everybody for remaining civil. This could have, huh? Well, I'm just here trying to communicate with everybody. So I guess you can blame it on me, but it's really not about blame. I mean, you can blame, but we need to figure out and move forward. Do we want this money or do we not? And then everybody needs to be informed about if we don't accept this money, what are the ramifications?
Rich Jacobs, 227 Jersey Way, and I first want to thank the people that organized this, Brent, Tyler, everybody from the state for having this meeting. This was an awesome opportunity, I think, for all of us to learn a lot of background information that even I didn't have. I had been approached back in 2021 about this project, and at the time, it was the feeling that we as homeowners all own that land in the middle. And I kept saying, no, it's the homeowners association, it's somewhere else. So it's nice that it's gone beyond that. It's nice that it's gone beyond people saying that we had to form a homeowners association and that there are other options available. I, for one, appreciate the opportunity to hear all this information. And what I'm hoping will happen is that the town, and this was actually what some of us had wanted back then, was that the town would move forward in a fair and equitable way, work with the homeowners, if necessary, charge out fees. In the beginning, it would be all grant monies, but we all recognize that, yes, there's a grant to build this infrastructure, but down the road, there's going to be liability and everything else, but that I, for one, would appreciate if the town was able in some way to coordinate this, to see if it makes sense to move forward, and if it does, to get the appropriate approvals and permissions from different people and landowners and things like that. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think that's probably the best way, from my standpoint, to move forward, that trying to form an HOA, yes, it can be specific to stormwater and not other things, but that's going to take a lot of time to do. Doing a fire district, I was part of a fire district and involved in that, and it may be simpler than an HOA, but it's still a very complicated process to get going. So apologize for talking on here, but I would appreciate, I guess, for one, if there was some way that we could say, yeah, town of Morrisville, thank you for bringing this up, and if you can move forward and try to make this happen or see if it makes sense to go forward, I, for one, think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
I have a quick question for Tyler, and the select board
Sir?
has this question.
If you could for the recording.
Wally Lee, 7 Jersey Way. Quick question for Tyler, the select board's going to ask this, and the town manager's going to ask this. In your experience going forward, once this is built, what is its lifespan and maintenance costs?
That's a good question.
Yes,
Yeah, well, the ongoing costs are, you have annual operating fees due to the state. And then you have annual inspections and reportings that are due, and the town has been covering those for the last many years. And then if there's issues, then you have to pay to take care of them. For example, in the past, the town has paid to, take care of parts of the stormwater system. And some years that can be $0, and some years that can be hundreds to thousands of dollars. In the case of the stormwater chamber system, I don't know what the lifespan is. If I had to guess, I'm going to say decades and decades. It'd be there for a long time because you're supposed to maintain it. And it has viewports where you can see what's going on in there, and you can pump them out, and you can keep them clean and working. And so the intent is that they would be there for a very long time.
I'm assuming that the select board knows that when the select board voted to accept the roads, they also accepted all the stormwater. That was part of the agreement between H.A. Menage and the town of Morristown, so I was here for that vote.
And that may or may not be true, but in practicality today, a stormwater system to meet the state rules requires participation from the landowners.
That's history. Move forward.
Yeah.
That last comment kind of goes to the one point that I just think has not been clarified properly, and maybe it can't be in this forum. But what gives the right to the state or the town or whatever to determine that my property or your property that happens to be on Jersey Way is different from a home in town? They're clearly being treated differently, and it appears to be it's been because we've been, unbeknownst to most of us, or maybe all of us, have been in this no man's land status between when Menage developed the property with some sort of vague expectation that there would eventually be collective responsibility, and that was either not communicated or not enforced or whatever. Meanwhile, as homeowners, we've watched the town take over more and more operation of the roads or other, systems like the wastewater, apparently, we're learning. And I remember, I was living here during that time, and I remember when the town started to plow the roads, and I thought, great, we're moving from sort of a realtor situation where plots are being up for sale, and now we've reached some sort of threshold where we become part of the normal town. And our taxes go, like the taxes of somebody who lives right in downtown, to all the services that we enjoy as citizens of the town. So I would say, just purely speaking for myself, I have no idea what the rest of the homeowners would say. That's my ultimate goal. I just want to be part of the normal town. And we've been zoned in the high density residential area. Clearly, the vision of the town plan is to build out more and more. We are going to be part of the new downtown. And I'm shocked, honestly, that the state, I'm glad because these grant funds sound like they're going to be very useful, but I'm shocked that the state has the power to make that distinction, to look back retroactively, and also to say, okay, this collection of homes, which by the way has been in some kind of no man's land that everyone here admits is vague, is different from this collection of homes in town. And I understand that apparently there's a legal criteria for that, but looking forward, I would echo what you're saying, just to move and be a regular part of the town, and whatever we need to do to take advantage of the grant money in the short term, but not move in the opposite direction of that, not take moves that are going to sort of apportion us off or set us aside in more ways from the rest of the town. I just want to know that my taxes are going to pay for the services that the town needs to operate, and that there's not extra billing that's going to happen later on, or liability. And I'm grateful that the town did that. It would have been nice to know that that's what was going on, that we were in this no man's land.
Do you know this new development that Monash is doing at the end of Jersey Way?
Yeah.
Does that fall into this? Is this part of the,
No, because that's built after 2002. So there are new standards that were adopted since your home was built that apply to that subdivision. They will have to do basically what is being proposed for your property. They'll have to do it to build that project. They have to provide treatment for that.
secondly, I'd like everybody to know that if this isn't clarified, when you go to sell your property, you have a lien on your property now. Because you will have to disclose that.
Any other questions? Anybody else want to pose any questions while we have Steve and Tyler here?
What are you gonna do next? What are you as a town gonna do next? You're keeping us all informed. This is a very, very critical deadline coming up. So how are we all gonna be notified as to what's going on from here forward?
So my plan is to stay in regular communication with the state. May 14th, there was an email from the state that had moved deadlines from from September to the end of June. I've been in contact with the state. They're willing to be a little bit flexible, knowing that how would you describe it, in violation already? Could you help me with the verbiage to describe that?
Yeah, if I could speak to the grant side of it.
Sure.
Step back just a minute. The deadline, the new deadlines for the town are in flux and with negotiation with the town. But I guess the criticality of right now, as you've gathered, because ARPA needs to be encumbered by September, is confidence that this project can get to construction by 2026. And this funding supports the permitting and construction. So we need to know who's really going to apply for the permit and take that ownership. And we need to know that to know the project's successful within the ARPA timeline. So it's that I think the town is maybe wrestling with and posing to you, and that we're hoping to help provide information to support that decision is that timeline needs to happen earlier than September so that we can know if you're not proceeding, we can make the best use of this money for the good of the state and put it somewhere else by that deadline.
And this was an opportunity to hear initial feedback about initially how the residents feel. We have really no authority over all of you. So initial question is an HOA feasible? If not an HOA, fire district's been brought up. I've received information from our legal counsel that fire district requires, I believe, all the residents of this community to approve it. So if an HOA is not something that the residents would consider moving forward with, how realistic is it for a fire district? And then trying to get a risk assessment for the town if we were to, again, step up and assume full responsibility, and what our liabilities would be doing that, and communications with the landowners that we would need to use easements for to be able to move forward. So my plan is to keep you all updated regularly. Mail, I don't think is the most efficient, honestly. So I would like to find out from a majority of you how I can maintain communications with you all and inform the town, the select board, so that we can move forward and try to address the milestones that the state is providing. I mean, we know that it'll be before September. It'll likely be July or August, where they'll be looking for some sort of commitment or another. That's my assumption.
Around then, yes.
Can you repeat the costs after the grant? I used to understand that.
Sure, so the grant amount is for $316,675. The costs, projected costs back in 2021, including construction, design, engineering.
It'll be double that. It'll be double that, yeah.
Well, I will say there were some buffers built in, and Tyler, can you give any feedback? But the amount is $439,900, so essentially $440,000. Tyler, in your opinion,
But there,
inflationary pressures?
but there was a 20% contingency put on the construction cost. What was that construction cost?
$272,900 with a 20%.
That included a 20% contingency, and then what were the next two line items?
Design engineering, $31,000, and there's a note here that was high
Well,
estimate.
and then the next one was another,
Bid and construction engineering, high.
yeah. So there's 80,000 there for just engineering and permitting, which isn't from my firm, it's for another consultant, which seems very high. I think those numbers are inflated. And then the last one was,
10,000 for legal.
legal fees for 10,000, and then there was a 25% increase just for COVID.
COVID-based escalation factor cost of $88,000.
What would typically be the Chris Walsh. I just want to say, I do appreciate the goal of, clean stormwater and improving water quality throughout our region. I appreciate that. I think, like a lot of people, I'm kind of blindsided by a lot of this. But my question is, what would be the mechanism to collect the portion of this that typically will be the mechanism to collect the portion of this that the grant wouldn't cover? Like in other situations, is the homeowners association assessed directly, and what happens if not everybody in the neighborhood wants to be part of that homeowners association? I'm just really unclear on how the money would be collected.
If there was no HOA, there was no fire district, there's potential for the town to implement a vote, townwide vote for a special tax assessment. That's another option. And so that would require a majority vote of the townspeople. And that's a possibility that the continued maintenance is, well, the additional cost of construction and then the continued maintenance would be collected. And I'm not saying that that's the avenue. I'm in the process, and other people in the process of evaluating various options. So that is one method.
Does the state have any experience with other developments like this on how the remainder of the costs are assessed and collected?
I would say our particular program funding regulatory work is relatively new for us. And in particular in the 3-acre space for funding construction, the public schools and manufactured housing communities, we're aiming to support 100%. So when you're asking about our experience with this, it's really these 7 public-private partnerships and where are they at? And I think it's diverse. The one I can speak most to is a one located in Burlington, where it's really the private partner that is going to be leveraging the remainder of the dollars. Other folks could explore alternative grant funding to fill in that gap. You are in the Lake Champlain Basin. That Lake Champlain Basin program has large implementation grants to support stormwater. So I guess my answer is that it's a limited suite of experience of how people have filled the gap for the regulatory obligation, but it's been diverse. And Maddie, have you seen anything else you wanted to add to that?
On the head, John.
I have at least one other client that is a subdivision that has a town-owned road, and in that situation, they're gonna be going after funding to cover all the engineering and permitting costs. And the hope is that the actual construction costs are pretty minimal in order for them to meet the 3-acre rule requirement, but that the cost for that's gonna come out of the HOA fees.
What happens in the situation where, how many homes, there are 50 homes and, maybe 10 homeowners agree to be part of the HOA, so what happens? It seems like you have to have unanimous buy-in to the HOA to have it.
It takes long.
That work.
That's my question. I'm a homeowner, I'm not, I'm a homeowner, I'm not part of the condominium association. How does that affect me? Do I have to buy into the condominium association HOA? Or is there a different?
We would have to form it, and you would be required to be part of it, I guess.
Well, that's a question. I don't know whether you have a total answer to that, but who do I go to find out what the answer would be? And the piece of property, when I bought it, it was that nothing would ever be built on it. Now I have a stormwater deposit system going in right behind my house. So how many changes does that, how many changes does that, can the town or the state or whatever do? You buy a home, this is stated on your contract, and this is on your deed, that nothing will ever be built there. Now, 20 years later, things are changing, the state is changing or whatever. How often can the state, maybe there's gonna be more houses built behind there, on top of this system?
Just to clarify, like, if there's new permitting for new developments, they'll be under the current stormwater permitting, and they will have to proceed with a separate stormwater permit that will not impact this development. I right now cannot answer how you can proceed with an HOA. And this was just an initial informational meeting. I wish we had all the answers. We did want to feel like how people would people here consider an HOA? And I don't want to assume, if everybody would communicate with me to give me some sort of feedback on that, I can be better informed and sort of look for potential alternatives.
So are you saying the next step is to let you know what we think should be the next step? Like, should we form an HOA, or should we, is that what I'm hearing from you? Like,
Yeah, and we are happy to host another meeting. The state has been very nice to come here and explain very complicated stormwater rules and the reasons. And very happy to offer space here for people to gather and, the residents of this development to gather and discuss it. We do have deadlines, and so the town needs to be informed about what the residents as a whole are thinking. And so happy to be, sort of a liaison and help everybody communicate with one another. Unfortunately, I had to choose between a couple of dates, and it just so happens that tonight is when the Jersey Heights Condominium Association is meeting, so I've had some...
We changed it to tomorrow night.
Oh, you did?
That's why we're here.
Okay, I don't know everybody yet, so I didn't know who was
So a
who.
lot of people here from.
So I'm sorry, you didn't bring any food.
We gotta bring some tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Maybe you could pass around something we can put our emails on.
Sure. And I've already thanked the state, I've thanked Tyler. I really want to thank Judy here, because she didn't have to stay after work, and I would have never been able to handle all this technology, so thank you.
As the condo association, we already have. So is that association a single entity that would have to interface with the larger homeowners association?
That's a legal
Very,
question.
very complicated.
That's a legal question, but I do not I think that it would be individual residents, but I'm not a lawyer, so I think if an HOA was formed, they would recognize individual residents even in those condos. I live in a townhome and in a development, and I think it would be by resident unit, but I can't 100% answer that for you.
Oh, is that your patent?
No, it's.
Yes, to your question, if it went over the words are written, and then it's not written to cover 79%, it's written for X amount.
I would encourage you to still use paper mail as well.
Yes,
And not
please.
online, because there are a lot of older people in your neighborhood.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of all ages, who may not use email, and I don't know what.
It's expensive. Yeah.
Okay.
We read our mail, we are invested in both environmental issues and the town issues. And we'll respond, that's why we're here.
Okay.
But I think that you gotta cover your bases.
So I promise that we'll reach out via mail. We'll have this on the website, and we'll try to keep the website updated, and I'll also reach out via email to this list. And I just ask that all of you try to help your neighbors so that we can inform everybody. And I appreciate it. I appreciate your recommendation. We will do that.
Can I make a suggestion, Len?
Yeah.
So, right here, this email, admin@morristownvt.gov. If you all email us to that email with a subject line of Jersey Heights, that would help, because reading the emails that you're writing on the paper is gonna be good, but it's chance for failure.
Okay.
So if you all email that email with Jersey Heights in the subject line, we can get you all grouped together and correspond. And if you could pass that on to your neighbors, that would be amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a hard deadline that we realistically to meet the grant expectations? Because this is obviously going to be, we're gonna have to take initiative within the neighborhood, and it's gonna take time. I mean, there are a lot of people who do care about this issue who either weren't able to be here or chose not to be here, and we're behind the eight ball, obviously.
Yeah, it's a great question. We would like to see this project be successful. I just want to say that up front. And that's why I was mentioning to Brent that we're happy to kind of negotiate a timeline. There's not a specific date right now because we're still working with legal on what additional assurance would be suitable. An actual formation of an HOA by September is not going to happen, but what sort of documentation would provide that is still sort of getting some guidance on. And so that's why we haven't been able to sort of formalize what that required milestone is. So definitely appreciate that there's a ton of work on all of your plates to explore these things in a very short time frame, and really appreciate you stepping up to help your neighbors kind of understand some of the nuances of this.
And there may be people who refuse to participate, and I don't know what you
I think
would
she just said her
situation.
Why, Brent, why can't the town lawyer draw up an association document that we can go to door and have everybody in?
That's something we've considered. Again, I was just informed of this 10 or 11 days ago. So, and I worked in real estate development, so I'm very conscious of billables for attorneys. So I didn't want to just start having something drawn up, drafted, when we had no chance of an HOA. So, if you think that an HOA, that all of you can form that, the town will try and work with you to help with that process. But I didn't want to be jumping the gun without an initial conversation and saying, hey, draft an HOA for us and have the town charge $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. But that's something we can consider.
I think it's a good
Is the
idea.
town completely, has the town made a decision about not being the sole responsible party? Like, is that just completely off the table?
Well, as a town manager, I would say that nothing's completely off the table. We're doing a risk assessment, and I need to inform the select board. So the select board, there's 3 members here that listened. There'll be further conversations, and we'll try to, we will be conferring with, town council and trying to figure out a solution. I mean, the other option is we don't accept this grant money, and then eventually the state will come in and enforce, like Jim said.
Yeah.
And we're, 2023 was supposed to be the deadline, so the deadline's already extended. And I understand that many of you were not informed of this, but I'm just stating that those are the dates. So these are all great questions, and I hope you understand that I certainly don't have all the answers yet, and the select board can't have all the answers yet because they're becoming more educated.
I asked the question not to put you on the spot,
Sure,
but because, as I stated before, my ultimate goal is for us to be part of the town, like any other part of town. And I hope we're not gonna close doors to that being a possibility.
Of course not.
I bought my house in 2020. Would there have been anything, they didn't have to disclose anything to me about that, about this?
I just bought mine
in
in
September
September
20,
just 8
stormwater
months ago.
permit.
And I knew nothing about this, and my attorney, nothing like this.
They would have searched.
Now they're telling you it's no good.
No. The permit, the current permit is valid, the town renewed it. But that permit is going to be incorporated into this 90/50 permit, the 3 acre. When your permit, I don't know when it expired, but it's going to expire. Maybe Terry or Terry, do you know when the 90/10 permit expires?
I think it already had. So an application for what we call an initial notice of intent was submitted with the town as the only applicant. That permit was never issued. So it's sort of in a limbo category, so to speak, in that we have an application that was submitted, but it was never moved forward to issuance.
So I want that the town, I understand it, did submit an updated permit to meet the requirements, but because of these new stormwater and this 3 acre rule, it's been pending with the state. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's in an incomplete status, so it was never issued, and that would have been only a temporary permit. It was a 2-step process, and then afterwards, the second permit would be the 5-year term permit.
I wanted to make sure you didn't misunderstand that the town somehow missed submitting an update. We've submitted it, but it's been pending because of the new interpretations of this 3 acre rule.
First, is it Maddie? Yes. Please, would you get a good microphone for where you're working? Because we could not understand what you were saying, so that would be very helpful. The other thing is, it would seem to me that if the town were able and willing to handle the legal aspects and then the contractor aspects and the maintenance aspects with this, and send us the bill for it, it would seem to be much better than if we do, okay, we need to, as an HOA or whatever, find somebody who's going to maintain this for the next 50 years, and somebody who's going to do the assessment for everybody. It gets very complex, whereas there is an organization that does maintenance. in the town. There is an organization that works with contractors in the town. So that's my suggestion.
Just a quick follow-up, I'm curious of the 700, I think was the number of, am I right that that's the number of 3 acres?
Roughly.
Identified roughly around the state?
Right.
3 acres.
Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, that's where the rule applies, so that's where they exist. Yeah.
Okay, so, and I think I've said this before, but it makes logical sense to me that a private landowner who has more than 3 acres of impermeable surface would be held accountable to this, and also homeowner associations, HOAs that have been set up that way in a knowing way. Is there any other of those 700 properties or whatever, people who are going to be liable, I don't know the proper term, that has been in a limbo situation like this?
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't put a number on it, but it's definitely been an issue for a number of sites in a number of different towns. So yeah, and this is one of the toughest scenarios. So I do empathize with all of you in that regard, where there has never been an HOA and the residents have been, so to speak, sort of in the dark on some of this. So I just want to emphasize that, you know, we do understand this, and you're certainly not alone in the state.
Is it possible to obtain a list of those communities in some way? Location?
Yeah, we have a list on our website, and I think, you know, even the town is likely aware of that. They may be able to even point you to that. But if you go to the Stormwater Program website, there is a list of the properties.
The list is categorized by people in the limbo category, or that's what I'm interested in, is where are the limbo communities?
We don't have, yeah, I mean, that's not shown on the list. You know, that's something that, you know, we have our own internal database and we keep track of those things. You know, we could certainly do query work and produce that result to determine the number of incomplete 3-acre applications. But yeah, it's a substantial number. I mean, because this is a new regulation, and it, you know, it is a substantial ask of homeowners and landowners.
Right, I'm asking because I think it indicates a flaw in the legislature's decision, honestly.
Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate it. And between the list that's being gathered here and people emailing in, we can begin to form a more complete communication network, and we will be communicating also via video.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
How's it going?
Thank you, Maddie. Thank you.
You? Staying busy.
So busy.
Yes.